John here from Great Lakes Country, and today we're making the most amazing, classic, cheesy scalloped potatoes. My absolute favorite side dish to serve with Christmas dinner, but equally as delicious all year round. Now, of course, the main ingredient to this dish is potatoes, and we're gonna be peeling and cutting up a few of these. But before that, we need to make our sauce, and I don't wanna peel and cut these potatoes up too early because they're gonna start turning brown by the time I'm ready for them. So like I said, we're gonna start with our cream sauce. And the first thing I need to do is simply cut up a yellow onion. Pretty standard chop. I'll probably go a little bit on the fine side of this dice rather than big coarse pieces, but just get this onion chopped up just about how you would for anything. And next we need some fresh garlic. I'll go with somewhere between 4 and 6 cloves, depending on how big they are. And I'll finely mince those up or use a garlic press if you prefer. All right, we're ready to make our sauce. So we've got our burner on about medium heat. And in a somewhat large saucepan, we're gonna get some butter melting, 6 tablespoons. And once that butter's good and melted, in go the onions. We'll just saute these, let them cook down for just a few minutes until they start to get nicely softened. We don't want them brown, we don't want them burnt, just nice and soft and just starting to get a little translucent. Then when we're there, we'll throw in that minced garlic and cook it all for about another minute. Next, with the help of all that butter in here, we're gonna be making a roux. So into the pan goes 6 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, and we're just gonna get that all stirred into the buttery onion and garlic. It's gonna get real thick. It's gonna turn into almost a bit of a paste. That's exactly what we're looking for. And at this point, we just need to let it all cook for about another minute or so. You always want to let it cook for a minute or two after you add the flour, so the heat can cook off some of that raw flour taste. Just makes everything taste a lot better in your final product. And at this point, I've got the heat turned down to about medium low, and we need to start adding our milk. I'll be using about 3 cups of whole milk, and we want to start adding it and whisking it in very gradually. We'll just do about a splash at a time, whisking pretty much constantly. This is gonna get real thick at first, but as we add a little more, it's gonna loosen up. This is gonna end up giving us a beautiful, perfectly thick sauce, and by adding that milk gradually, we can avoid any flour clumping that might happen if you just poured it all in at once. So just keep adding it in, keep whisking. And when it's all in, I'll switch back to my wooden spoon. Just keep giving it a couple of stirs while that continues heating up on that medium-low heat. At this point, the sauce is a bit on the thin side, but as we let it continue heating up over the next few minutes, it's gonna get perfectly thick, exactly where we want it. And while we're waiting for that to happen, we can season. So I'll go in with about 2 teaspoons of some kosher salt and about the same amount black pepper. Now our sauce is finished, and I'll just set this aside with a lid on the pan, and I'll reduce the heat to as low as possible so it stays relatively warm while we get the rest of the components ready. Next, we need to peel and cut up between 6 and 7 russet potatoes, depending on how big they are. We basically need enough to slice up and cover a 9x13 casserole dish in 2 different layers, with each slice overlapping a little bit. Now, ordinarily when I'm peeling and slicing up potatoes for something like mashed potatoes, as I cut them up, I'll throw them in a pot of water because that water is gonna keep them from turning brown while I'm working on them. But I don't want the potatoes for this dish soggy and sopping wet, so I don't wanna do that. So what that means is I have to work kind of quick from here on out, getting these potatoes peeled up, sliced up, and having this whole thing assembled in the casserole dish. And if some of them start to turn a little brown while I'm still working on them, that's not really the end of the world. Once this whole thing is smothered in sauce and cheese and baked, not really gonna notice it. It's not gonna affect the flavor at all. Just move as quickly as you reasonably can from here on out. As for how we're gonna slice up these russets, well, it's pretty simple. First, I like to cut just a little bit off the end, create us a nice flat surface, and then we're just slicing. We wanna go pretty thin, not so thin that you can practically see through the slices. You know, we're not needing to get these as thin as like a mandolin can get them, so you don't gotta worry about that. We don't want these things completely as thin as paper, but just pretty thin so they stack and layer up real nice in the pan. Just get yourself a good sharp chef knife of some sort and get to slicing. All right, let's put together these scalloped potatoes. Here I've got my trusty cast iron 9x13 casserole dish, but of course you can use any casserole dish you like. And I'm going to lightly grease it with a little bit of olive oil. Use whatever kind of oil you like, use butter, use cooking spray. Just get a real light coating of a little bit of lubrication on your pan there to make sure nothing sticks to it. Now we just need to start laying out potato slices. And I'll make sure that each one overlaps the last by just a little bit. We get a nice, complete, full coverage of potato slice in our pan. And after we've got one layer, I'm gonna go back and do one more layer, but this time I won't overlap them. I don't want this overall potato layer to be too insanely thick, but I do find that just one individual layer isn't quite enough for how I like it. So just do one more sort of partial layer, something like that looks pretty good to me. Now remember that sauce from earlier? Well, now we're gonna just start ladling it over top of our potato layer. Just to get a nice even coating on there, we're gonna use just about half of this sauce for this layer. And as we go, we'll spread it out a little bit. We want to make sure we have full coverage all the way to the side walls of the pan. Of course, don't go too heavy with it because you still need enough to do this a second time after another potato layer. That looks good to me, so we'll just do our second layer of potatoes, or layer and a half if you prefer. And next, you guessed it, the rest of our sauce. Same as before, ladle it over top, spread it around, make sure you got some good even coverage. Now, if we were doing a true classic scalloped potato, this is where we'd stick it in the oven. But I promised a cheesy scalloped potato, so we need some shredded cheddar cheese. And I'll just get that distributed and sprinkled all over top, pretty much about as much as we think we need to have a nice, I'll say thick layer on top. Normally 1 8-ounce bag of shredded cheese is gonna be enough for this, but I'll admit I do like to go on a little bit heavier, so I end up busting into a second 8-ounce bag just to fill in some of these low spots. Trying to make the ultimate scalloped potatoes here. I don't really wanna cheap out on the cheesy top. Now our pan is almost ready to go into the oven, but there's one last thing we have to do first, and that's to cover the whole pan in aluminum foil. I'll seal it up nice and tight, and then this whole thing is going into the oven that's been preheated to 350 degrees for 45 minutes. After which, I'll pull the pan out, remove the foil, and put the pan back in the oven and continue baking for another 15 to 20 minutes, or until the potatoes are looking wonderfully fork tender, the cheese is melted, lightly browned on top, and looking all around magnificent. Then I'll set the pan out on the counter for about another 10 to 15 minutes just to let it start to cool a little bit. That's gonna let the sauce and everything set up a little better. Not to mention make these delicious potatoes even remotely cool enough to actually start eating. In the meantime, optionally garnish with some fresh, finely chopped chives just to make it extra beautiful and a little more tasty. Now, there's nothing left to do but dig in and serve some up. The tender, creamy potatoes with the onion in there, those beautiful, darker brown, crispy edges of the cheese, which I'm sure is my favorite part. If there's a tastier and more festive potato dish for your Christmas dinner, well, I haven't seen it. And while I start digging into this beautifulness, be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future holiday recipe videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.